back to Youth Tutors, where we make learning simple, fun, and easy to understand. Today, we're diving into one of the most terrific events in America's past, the Tea Act of 1773. You might be wondering, how could a law about tea lead to a full-blown revolution? Well, this wasn't just about a warm drink. It was about power, protest, and taxation without representation. In this video, we'll break down what the Tea Act was, why it upset the American colonists, and how did it lead to one of the most famous protests in U.S. history, the Boston Tea Party. Let's jump in and see how one act stirred up a storm between Britain and the colonists. So the East India Company, which was one of England's oldest and most successful trading companies, bought products in one country and then sold them in another. However, the years after the French and Indian War, which was also known as 7 Years of War because it lasted for 7 years, the company was going out of business. In an effort to stop this, the British Parliament passed the Tea Act in May 1773 to help the company. This gave the East India Company a tax break on their tea, which made it cheaper than tea that was being smuggled into the colonies from other places. This encouraged colonists to buy tea from the East India Company. Since it would now be cheaper than the other ones, colonists would have to pay the townshend tax on this tea, but it was still cheaper than the smuggled tea. And then the colonists started with the taxation without representation. So before I get into what it really means, there is a slight example that might help you understand what it really means and what the colonists were trying to say when they said taxation without representation. So imagine if your school made new rules that you had to pay money to use the playground. But no one asked the students what they thought. You didn't get to vote or share your opinion or even have a student on the rule making the tea. That would feel pretty unfair, right? That's basically what taxation without representations meant. That's how the American colonists felt. The British government was making them pay taxes, like the tea tax, like we're talking about. But the colonists didn't have anyone in the British Parliament to speak for them. So they had no one in the British Parliament to tell the British Parliament that I don't believe that colonists would like this. There was no opinion of the colonists in this whole thing. So they had no say in the decisions that they made, and that made them really angry. So they started saying no taxation without representation. And that basically means don't make us pay taxes if you don't have a voice in the government. So first, give us a voice in the government, give us a voice in the British Parliament, and then apply taxes on us with our opinions in it. The Tea Act was passed in 1773. The Tea Act stated that only one company, which was the British East India Company, could sell tea to the American colonies. So except the British East India Company, no other company could sell tea to the American colonies. And this gave the company a monopoly, meaning that no one else was allowed to sell tea there. So isn't that a monopoly for East India Company? The Tea Act also kept a small tax on tea, even though the price of tea was actually cheaper than before. The colonies saw this as an unfair and sneaky. They didn't want cheap tea if it meant giving up their rights, which is obvious. Why would the colonies give up their rights if it's something that they didn't have an opinion in? Colonial reaction. The colonists were angry and there were protests done across the colonies. The colonists saw the act as another attempt by the British to assert their authority and impose unfair taxation without their opinions in it. There were boycotts done. Boycotts done against British goods, including tea, to demonstrate their opposition to the Tea Act. There was a refusal to unload tea. In several ports, including Philadelphia and New York, colonists prevented ships carrying tea from unloading their cargo, which was another demonstration of their opposition to the Tea Act. Next was the biggest protest in U.S. history, the Boston Tea Party, which occurred on December 16, 1773, where a group of colonists known as the Sons of Liberty disguised as Native Americans and then boarded British ships in Boston Harbor and dumped 342 chests of tea into the water. So what happened next? Well, Britain punishes the colonists with the Intolerable Acts. Intolerable Acts were a series of 4 laws passed by the British Parliament in 1774, right after what happened in Boston Harbor, to punish Massachusetts for the Boston Tea Party incident. This led to even more anger and eventually the American Revolution. So why does it matter? It showed that the colonists wanted a voice in the government. They didn't want it to be ruled without having a say. It led to the Boston Tea Party, one of the most famous protests in American history. It made the British government crack down harder on the colonists, leading to even more anger. It helped unite the colonies, people who were once unsure starting working together against the Britain rule. It pushed the colonies closer to the American Revolution, which led to the birth of the United States of America. It was also a reminder that people would stand up for their rights and freedom, even over something as simple as tea. Thanks for watching. Now you know how a little thing like tea helped spark a big moment in America's past. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out on more fun lessons. Got questions or thoughts? Drop them in the comments below. We love hearing from you guys. Stay curious, keep learning, and we'll see you next time on Youth Tutors. Bye bye!